Why was the captain's voice cut off so suddenly? The intercom had been warm, reassuring, casual even. Then, nothing. The kind of silence that spreads like wildfire in a cabin, feeding on nervous glances, on half-formed whispers, on the sound of a baby's cry that feels too sharp, too misplaced against the steady hum of engines. No one wanted to admit it, but everyone knew something had gone wrong. Emily Carter tugged one earbud out, her instincts prickling. She was only 16, just another face among more than 200 passengers bound for Madrid. Hoodie pulled tight, long hair tied back. She looked like any teenager traveling with her mother. Yet her pulse quickened differently than the others. She had heard enough cockpit chatter in her small-town airfield back home to know this wasn't routine. Pilots didn't go silent in the middle of a sentence. Her mother, Sarah, shifted in the seat beside her, flipping the page of a magazine, unaware at first. But Emily's eyes were fixed forward, scanning for the attendants, for the small cues, the way the curtain twitched, the sudden rush of a uniformed figure hurrying down the aisle with too much urgency to disguise. Something cracked inside her chest, a feeling both foreign and familiar. A warning. 10 minutes, no update. The quiet stretched into something unbearable. When the intercom finally clicked alive again, the voice on the other end was shaking, rehearsed but fragile. A minor issue on the flight deck. Everything under control. Passengers should remain calm. The words were wrong, too soft, too careful. It was the kind of calm that meant panic was not far behind. Emily pressed her palms against her thighs, fighting the urge to stand. She wasn't certified, not even close. But her weekends spent in the cockpit of a Cessna, her hours of training, her endless scribbled notes about radio calls and emergency procedures, they were real. More real than the false calm echoing from that intercom. Something wasn't right up there, and if no one else acted. She leaned close to her mother. "Mom," she whispered, her throat dry, "if the pilots can't fly, I might be able to help." Sarah froze. Her hand gripped Emily's so tight it hurt. "Emily, no, you're just a kid. This isn't a trainer plane. It's huge, it's different, it's—" Her voice cracked. "You can't." But the truth was staring back at her in her daughter's eyes. Fear, yes. But behind it, determination burned hotter than fear. That was what Sarah saw, and it terrified her more than the silence from the cockpit. The intercom snapped again. This time, desperation bled through. "If there is anyone on board with flying experience, please make yourself known immediately." A ripple moved through the cabin like a cold wind. People turned, searching, waiting for someone, anyone to stand. No one did. Businessmen looked away. Parents clutched children tighter. An elderly couple held hands, eyes closed as if waiting for fate. Emily's breath caught. This was it. Her chest ached with the weight of choice. Then she unbuckled her belt. The click was louder than it should have been. Every head turned. A murmur swept through the rows as she rose to her feet, too small, too young, yet somehow steady as she spoke. "I have flight training," she said. Her voice carried further than she thought it could. "I'm not licensed yet, but I know the basics. I can try." Gasps, disbelief. A scoff from somewhere in the back. "She's just a teenager." But the attendants, pale and desperate, exchanged a look that said they no longer had the luxury of disbelief. They nodded quickly, motioning her forward. Sarah's hand caught hers at the last moment, trembling, clinging. "Please, please be careful." Emily nodded, her throat too tight for words. Then she turned, each step toward the cockpit heavier than the last. It felt like walking into the heart of a storm. The door shut behind her with a heavy thud. And there it was, the sight she hadn't wanted to imagine. Both pilots slumped over, unmoving, panels blinking with angry red lights, warning chimes breaking the air like shards of glass. For a second her legs wanted to give out. She was 16. She was in way over her head. This wasn't a simulation. It wasn't a trainer aircraft with her instructor by her side. It was 220 lives balanced on her trembling hands. But then a thought steadied her, sharp as steel. "If I don't try, no one else can." She slid into the captain's seat, headset awkwardly oversized, hands hovering uncertainly over the maze of levers and screens. Her heart pounded, but she pressed the transmit button anyway, her voice breaking on the first word. This is passenger Emily Carter. I'm 16. Both pilots are unconscious. I have some flight training, single engine only. Please, someone talk me through this. For a long moment, only static, the longest moment of her life. Then finally a voice, calm, male, steady as stone. Flight 327, this is Heathrow Control. We copy. Identify yourself again, please. Her chest rose, fell. Emily Carter, 16 years old. Both pilots are unconscious. I have some training, I need help. She could almost hear the disbelief on the other end. Controllers picturing her, barely more than a child, claiming the cockpit of an Airbus. Then came the voice again, firm, reassuring. Emily, my name is James Holloway. I'll be your controller. We're going to do this together. You are not alone. The words sank into her like a lifeline. For the first time since she stepped through the cockpit door, she let out a breath that wasn't shaking. Okay, James, tell me what to do. The cabin behind her had no idea. Passengers whispered, prayed, some too scared to speak. Her mother sat frozen, her nails digging into her palms, silently begging God to prove 16 years of love wouldn't end here. Emily checked the autopilot. The small green light blinked back at her, still engaged. Relief washed through her chest. The plane was stable for now, but stability wouldn't last forever. They all knew it. Good, James's voice came, calm but clipped. That gives us time. You're in an Airbus A330, correct? Yes, she answered quickly. All right, Big Bird, don't let that scare you. We'll take it one step at a time. First, confirm the pilot's still breathing. She leaned over, touched cold wrists. A pulse, faint but present. Relief again, tangled with dread. They were alive but unresponsive. Her voice trembled when she answered. Yes, they're alive, still unconscious. Copy that, then you're it, Emily. You're the pilot now. The words landed heavier than she thought they could. Pilot. Her. The absurdity almost made her laugh, if not for the choking knot in her throat. The attendants lingered near the door, watching her like they were staring at a miracle that hadn't happened yet. One whispered, almost too softly, "Do you really think you can do this?" Emily tightened her grip on the yoke, white-knuckled, eyes fixed on the blinking horizon ahead. "I have to." Word spread through the cabin faster than the engines could roar. A girl, barely 16, was flying the plane. Murmurs rippled, fear swelling, some voices breaking into sobs, others into disbelief. A few began to pray aloud. Yet no one stood to replace her. No one could. The headset crackled again. "Emily, repeat after me. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Flight 327 declaring an emergency." Her breath hitched. She pressed the button anyway. "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Flight 327 declaring an emergency." "Perfect," James said, his tone almost fatherly. "Now every pilot in this tower is focused on you. Airspace ahead is clear. Just keep calm, keep breathing, and keep talking to me. Can you do that?" Emily's hand trembled, but her voice came steadier than she felt. "Yes, I can." Silence in the cabin behind her. Silence in her chest. For the first time, Emily Carter wasn't just a passenger. She wasn't just a teenager in a hoodie with earbuds and dreams. She was something else. She was the one who had to keep them all alive. And with that realization, the extraordinary story truly began. What does courage sound like when spoken through the static of a headset? Emily wondered if the calm voice guiding her from miles away could feel the way her hands shook. The buttons and levers stretched out before her like a language she couldn't yet read. And still, James Holloway's voice carried weight, firm, deliberate, the way you'd talk to someone balancing on the edge of a cliff. "Emily, listen carefully. You don't have to know everything. You only have to follow my voice. Step by step, we'll get through this together." She squeezed the yoke tighter. She thought of the Cessnas back home, how she'd sit in the cockpit long after a lesson ended, running her hands over the switches, whispering the checklists to herself. But this wasn't a checklist she'd ever practiced. This was survival. Her throat tightened. "Okay, James, tell me what to do." The controller's tone softened. "Good girl, first confirm your altitude. Look for the screen that says Alt. What number do you see?" Emily scanned the glowing panels until she found it. 35,000. "Copy, that's good. Autopilot's keeping you steady. Next, check your speed. It should read just under 500 knots. 485, she said. "Perfect, everything's stable. That gives us time." Time, the word didn't feel real. In the cabin behind her, people sat in a silence louder than screams. Some clutched each other as if skin-to-skin contact could protect them from gravity. Others stared blankly at the seat in front of them, refusing to let their minds finish the thought of what might happen. Emily's mother sat in row 14, nails pressed into her palms, her lips moving in prayer. To Sarah, time didn't feel like safety. It felt like delay. Delay before disaster. Emily's headset crackled again. "Now, Emily, I want you to breathe, deep, steady. A calm pilot is a safe pilot. Say it back to me." Her lips parted, the words trembled. "A calm pilot is a safe pilot." "That's it, keep that in your head." She closed her eyes for half a second, inhaling, exhaling, fighting to keep her lungs from locking. When she opened them, the controls didn't look any less overwhelming, but they looked possible. The flight attendants whispered near the door, glancing back at the cabin as if expecting someone, anyone, to stand up and take over. No one did. They turned back to her, the weight of every soul pressing onto her shoulders. She felt it, a pressure more real than the yoke beneath her hands. "James," she whispered, "what if I can't do it? What if I mess up?" The reply came quickly, without hesitation. "Then we fix it together. Pilots make mistakes all the time. The trick isn't never messing up. It's correcting fast. Trust me, Emily, you're not alone in this." The knot in her chest loosened just slightly. Not gone, but looser. Enough for her to breathe. For the next stretch of sky, James's voice became her anchor. He guided her through systems she barely understood, explaining only what mattered. How to watch the horizon line, how to keep her speed stable, how to scan without letting panic tunnel her vision. She repeated everything back, like a student reciting lessons, except this time the lesson was survival. In the cabin, word spread in fragments. A teenager in the cockpit. 16, they said. "She's flying us." A mother clutched her child tighter. A businessman shook his head in disbelief. An elderly woman crossed herself. Hope and doubt mingled in the recycled air, neither strong enough to drown the other. And yet, even as fear gnawed at them, no one rose to challenge her. They stayed seated, strapped into fate, because deep down they knew the truth. No one else was standing. No one else could. Emily's eyes kept flicking to the slumped pilots, their chests still rising faintly. Relief that they lived warred with the terror of their silence. She whispered under her breath, "Don't leave me like this. Please wake up." But the only answer was the low hum of the engines. Hours passed like minutes, or maybe minutes like hours. Time lost meaning. Fatigue crawled through her limbs, heavy and unwelcome. Her body begged for rest, for release. But James's voice kept her anchored to the present. "Emily, repeat after me," he said again. "Fuel check." She scanned, found the gauge, reported the numbers. "Good, you've got plenty. Altitude steady. That's all we need right now." A mantra repeated in her head. Just one step, just one instruction, just one breath. Her mother sat frozen, staring at the cockpit door. Pride and terror wrestled inside her. She remembered the day Emily first begged for flying lessons, her excitement unshakable. Sarah had smiled then, thinking it a harmless dream, something safe to keep her daughter grounded in ambition. She never imagined those weekends in a Cessna would one day hold the weight of 220 lives. The headset crackled again. "Emily, we're planning your descent into Heathrow. Runway 27L long, wide, best chance we've got. Landing will be the hardest part, but we'll take it together." Her chest clenched. She landed a trainer before. It was always the part that made her stomach drop, the approach, the flare, the delicate balance between falling and flying. And now she had to do it in an Airbus A330, a steel giant more than 200 tons heavy. Her voice shook. "Okay, just tell me what to do." "You've already done the impossible," James said softly. "Now you just need to finish it." She swallowed hard, her throat dry. "I'll try." Outside, the sun bled into the horizon, painting the Atlantic in shades of fire. Passengers who still had the courage to look out the windows saw beauty. Emily saw distance, a finish line she wasn't sure she could reach. And in that cockpit, a girl who had boarded as a passenger, hidden in her hoodie and earbuds, sat rigid in the captain's chair, no longer invisible, no longer ordinary. She wasn't a hero yet, but she was all they had. What does the sky feel like when it becomes both your enemy and your only hope? Emily pressed her forehead briefly against the cool glass of the cockpit window. The horizon stretched endless, glowing with fading light, a canvas too calm for the storm building inside her chest. She wanted to believe this sky would carry her safely. Yet every second closer to England, the responsibility pressed heavier. Her headset hissed and James's voice cut through, steady and grounding. "Emily, you're about 50 miles out. We'll be starting your descent soon. Are you ready?" Her lips parted. The truth wanted to tumble out, that she wasn't ready, that she was 16, that she was terrified. But the cabin behind her didn't need a frightened girl. They needed a pilot. She forced her voice to hold. "Ready." "Good. First instruction. Don't disengage autopilot until I say. It'll keep you stable for now. We'll descend in stages." She looked at the glowing AP-1 light, the small green reassurance that machines could carry what she feared she couldn't. Her stomach twisted. If she turned it off, the plane would be hers, completely hers. She whispered to herself, "Passengers are depending on me." The words steadied her grip. James's tone shifted, firmer now. "All right, Emily, dial altitude down to 3,000 feet, slowly." Her fingers trembled on the knob, twisting carefully. The aircraft shuddered, engines roaring as the nose tilted downward. Her stomach dropped violently, and a chorus of gasps echoed faintly through the cabin behind her. A child cried out. Emily clenched her jaw, whispering, "Please hold together." "Good," James encouraged. "That's the start. The jet's heavy, it'll respond slow, so don't fight it." But alarms chirped suddenly, red flashes blinking across the panels. Emily's heart jumped into her throat. "James, alarms, there are alarms everywhere." "Stay calm," he ordered firmly. "That's normal during descent. It's just the plane working harder. Ignore them, trust me." Her chest heaved, but she forced herself to nod. "Okay," ignoring. Her palms were slick, the yoke slippery beneath her grip. She wiped her hands on her jeans, then grabbed hold again. "Look outside, Emily," James instructed. "See the lights." She lifted her eyes, and there they were, runway lights glowing faint through haze, distant but real. A destination, a promise, a threat. "I see them." "Good, that's where we're headed. Keep breathing." Passengers behind her whispered prayers. Some gripped armrests until their knuckles blanched. Her mother sat with eyes closed, tears leaking silently. In her mind, Sarah replayed every memory, Emily's first steps, her first flight lesson, the night she came home glowing after her first solo taxi across the runway. Pride and fear wove together so tightly it hurt to breathe. "Emily," James said again, calm but unrelenting. "Disengage autopilot on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Now." Her finger hovered, trembling, she pressed. The plane jolted. The weight of control slammed into her arms. The yoke fought back, heavier than anything she had known. For a split second, panic surged. "I can't hold this." But then a breath. One thought: if I let go, no one survives. She tightened her grip. The jet responded sluggishly, but it responded. "That's it," James encouraged, his voice steady as steel. "Gentle hands, don't overcorrect. You're the pilot now." Her chest heaved. "It's so heavy." "Of course it is, but so are you. Keep it steady." The runway lights grew larger, brighter. The descent felt faster, too fast. A shrill alarm screamed, "Sink rate, sink rate." Emily's pulse spiked. "James, it's dropping too quickly." "Pull back slightly, just slightly, don't yank." She eased the yoke, muscles trembling. The nose lifted just enough. The alarms dulled. "Perfect," James said. "Hold it there, you're lined up beautifully." Her breathing came faster, ragged. Her shoulders ached. She wanted to cry, but tears blurred vision. She blinked them back. "Gear down," James instructed. "Now." Her fingers shook as she reached for the lever. A loud groan echoed as landing gear unfolded. The plane rattled, shuddering under its own weight. Passengers screamed briefly at the noise, then hushed again, waiting. Always waiting. "Flaps full," James added. She pushed the lever. The wings shifted, the aircraft slowing. Runway lights loomed closer, glowing like a lifeline. "Okay, Emily," James's voice was softer now, but sharper too. "This is it. Align center, nose slightly up. Use rudder pedals for small corrections." Her feet pressed awkwardly on the pedals. The plane drifted left. She corrected, drifted right, corrected again. Each movement too big, then too small, like learning to walk all over again. 500 feet. Alarm shrieked, too low, too fast. Emily's chest clenched, her voice cracked. "I can't." "Yes, you can," James interrupted sharply. "Don't you dare quit now. Ease throttle back, hold steady. Let the runway come to you." Her breath hitched, her hands shook, but she obeyed. 400 feet, 300. Passengers braced. Some screamed, some prayed, some surrendered. 200 feet. The runway filled the windshield, rushing toward them. "Flare, Emily," James ordered. "Now nose up." She pulled back gently, arms burning. The aircraft dipped, then slammed hard onto the tarmac. The cabin erupted in screams as the plane bounced back into the air. "Correct it," James barked. She forced the nose level, flared again, teeth gritted. The jet slammed down a second time, harder than any landing she'd felt in training, but this time it held. Tires screeched, smoke curling as rubber met asphalt. Reverse thrust now. She shoved the throttles. Engines roared like thunder. The cabin shook violently, passengers shrieking as the plane rattled down the runway. The end of the tarmac rushed closer, closer. Then finally, agonizingly, the speed bled away. The massive aircraft shuddered, groaned, and at last rolled to a grinding stop. Silence. For a split second, the world held its breath. Then the cabin exploded, cheers, sobs, applause, strangers clinging to one another as if tethered to life itself. Emily slumped forward, arms weak, tears spilling freely. Her headset crackled one last time. James's voice, breaking with emotion, whispered, "Emily, you just saved them all. Welcome home, Captain." What does silence sound like after the storm? For a single suspended heartbeat, the cabin of Flight 327 was frozen. 220 lives sat in disbelief, staring at each other, waiting for confirmation that what they felt under their feet was real. That the shuddering stop, the screech of tires, the final groan of engines, meant they were alive. Then all at once it broke. Applause burst like a wave. Cheers collided with sobs. Strangers clutched one another, businessmen hugging mothers, children crying into the shoulders of people they'd never met. The sound wasn't just relief. It was something deeper, a collective return from the edge of nothingness. But in the cockpit, Emily Carter sat slumped over the yoke, her body trembling so violently she couldn't lift her head. Her arms burned, her throat raw. She wasn't cheering. She wasn't even breathing evenly. Tears streamed unchecked down her cheeks. She had landed an Airbus A330. She had done the impossible. And yet she felt like a ghost of herself, hollow, fragile, waiting to shatter at a touch. The headset crackled again, Heathrow's voice softer now, almost reverent. "Flight 327, this is Control. Incredible job, Emily. Stay where you are. Emergency crews are on their way." Her hand rose shakily. removing the headset. The world felt too quiet without the calm anchor of James Holloway's voice. Just the hum of dying engines, the faint cries of passengers, and her own racing heartbeat. A flight attendant appeared in the doorway, eyes wet, hands trembling as she placed them gently on Emily's shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. "My God, you really did it." Emily turned her head slowly, gaze drifting to the captain and first officer still slumped unconscious in their seats. Their breathing was shallow but steady. Relief washed through her again, sharp enough to sting. She had saved them too. Then the door burst open. Medics, firefighters, security personnel flooded the cockpit, voices urgent, movements swift. They moved toward the pilots, checking pulses, administering oxygen. Someone crouched to Emily's level, speaking gently. She couldn't process the words. Her body had gone beyond exhaustion. She sat frozen, as if releasing control would undo everything. And then arms around her, familiar, desperate, her mother. Sarah pressed her daughter so tightly Emily could barely breathe, tears soaking into her hoodie. "I thought I lost you," she sobbed. "I thought," but the words broke, too fragile to finish. Emily let herself collapse into that embrace. For the first time since she'd unbuckled her belt hours earlier, she wasn't holding anyone's life but her own. And it was enough. Passengers were guided out row by row, stepping onto the tarmac beneath flashing lights. Fire trucks lined the runway, ambulances waiting, reporters already gathering beyond the barriers. The night glowed red and blue, painted with urgency. But every passenger who descended those steps carried the same expression: awe, disbelief, gratitude. Some whispered thank you toward the cockpit windows. Others bowed their heads. A few simply touched the side of the aircraft, as if blessing the steel giant that had both threatened and saved them. Emily was among the last to leave, her mother's arm wrapped firmly around her. The air outside struck cold against her sweat-soaked skin. Cameras flashed immediately, news crews having caught wind of the miracle through air traffic chatter. Shouts filled the night. "Is it true a teenager landed the plane? What's your name? How old are you?" Emily flinched at the chaos, burying her face into her mother's shoulder. She hadn't thought about the world beyond the cockpit. She hadn't thought about cameras, headlines, strangers demanding answers. She had only thought of survival. Now survival had turned her into something she never wanted to be: news. Inside a quiet airport office, she sat wrapped in a blanket, sipping water handed to her by a kind official. Her hand still shook so badly she could barely hold the cup. She replayed the landing in her mind, the alarms, the bounce, the screams, and each time the fear swallowed her whole again. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a girl who had barely survived. Her mother sat close, refusing to let go of her hand. The woman's eyes were red, her voice hoarse from tears, but her grip was strong, stronger than Emily had ever felt it before. Reporters crowded outside the door, their voices a muffled storm. Questions slammed against the walls like waves. Yet when Emily finally agreed to step out, guided by her mother, something in her had shifted. She wasn't steady, not at all, but she was determined not to hide. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. The noise was overwhelming. But when she spoke, her voice was quiet, almost too soft for the chaos, yet it carried like a bell. "I'm not a hero," she said. "I just did what I had to do. I remembered my training. I trusted the people guiding me. And I knew everyone on board was counting on me. I couldn't let them down." Her humility struck harder than any headline. The crowd fell momentarily quiet, stunned by the raw truth of her words. By morning, her name was everywhere. News tickers blazed across screens: "Miracle in the sky," "16-year-old lands jetliner." Hashtags flooded social media. Videos recorded by passengers went viral. The moment cheers erupted, the prayers, the sobs. Clips of Emily stepping off the plane, pale but upright, spread across every corner of the internet. Experts debated on television, their faces still disbelieving. "It's unheard of," one veteran pilot said. The training gap between a Cessna and an Airbus A330 is astronomical, and yet she did it. Another added, "You can't measure what carried her through, only heart can explain it." The pilots, now recovering in a London hospital, released a statement within days. The captain's voice cracked with emotion. "We owe our lives to Emily Carter. When we went down, she stepped up. That girl saved us all." Letters poured in. Airline captains wrote to her, some admitting they had never faced what she had. Pilot associations extended invitations, aviation schools offered scholarships. One letter in particular stood out, written in neat cursive from an airline veteran. "You reminded us all why we became pilots in the first place. Courage, responsibility, love for others." Emily read it silently, her fingers tracing the ink. She didn't feel like she had courage. She felt like she had been scared every second. But maybe, she thought, courage wasn't the absence of fear. Maybe it was acting through it. Back home weeks later, her small-town airfield held a gathering in her honor. Banners waved, neighbors cheered, her instructor cried openly as he hugged her. "You always had the heart of a pilot," he said. "Now the whole world knows it too." But Emily's gaze drifted to the runway. The small strip of asphalt where her dreams had begun looked suddenly different. Not smaller, not bigger, just more fragile. She had always seen it as a starting point. Now it felt like a reminder that flying wasn't about glory. It was about trust, responsibility, the weight of lives in your hands. At night, when she lay awake staring at the ceiling, the sounds came back. The alarms, the screams, the violent thud of landing gear meeting earth. She pressed her palms over her ears, but memory never silenced. Fear lingered like a shadow. Yet within it, something softer lived too, a truth she hadn't known before. Heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear hoodies, earbuds in their pockets, and carry fear heavier than steel. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why did applause feel heavier than silence? Emily lay awake in a hotel room in London, staring at the pale ceiling while muffled city noises drifted through the glass. Her mother slept fitfully beside her, exhaustion finally winning the battle, but Emily's eyes refused to close. Every time she tried, the sounds returned, the alarms, the screams, the violent slam of rubber against asphalt. Her body jerked awake, breath ragged, palms damp. Survival hadn't ended when the plane stopped. Survival had followed her into the quiet. On the nightstand, her phone buzzed endlessly with notifications. Messages from strangers, thousands of them. "You're an angel, you're a hero, you're the bravest person alive." Her name was trending worldwide. But as she scrolled, the words blurred, meaningless against the truth clawing inside her chest. She hadn't felt brave. She had been terrified every second. Her mother stirred. "Emily, are you okay?" She swallowed hard, forcing her voice steady. "Yeah, just can't sleep." Sarah reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "You don't have to be strong all the time, honey." But Emily turned her head away, tears stinging. The world already saw her as strong. How could she admit she felt broken? The days that followed blurred into a storm of attention. Interviews, flashing cameras, reporters asking the same questions again and again. What were you thinking? How did you stay calm? What gave you the courage? She answered quietly, humbly, repeating the same truth she had whispered on the tarmac. "I just did what I had to do." The world loved her for it. News anchors called her a miracle. Pilots praised her. Schools offered scholarships. Strangers wrote letters. And yet when the cameras turned off, when the noise faded, Emily sat alone in her room and trembled. Her hands still shook, her breath still caught, her chest still clenched whenever she closed her eyes. One evening, a pilot who had written to her arranged to visit. Captain Ruiz, a woman with 25 years in the cockpit, sat across from Emily in the quiet of the hotel lounge. She didn't begin with praise. She began with honesty. "I read your interviews," Ruiz said, her voice low. "You told them you weren't a hero, that you were terrified. That's the part that made me want to meet you." Emily blinked, surprised. "Why?" "Because that's what flying really is. It isn't fearlessness. It's fear and responsibility colliding, and you keep going anyway. I've seen grown men freeze in situations less terrifying than yours. You didn't freeze. Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to believe it, but the memory of her hands shaking on the yoke mocked her. I thought I was going to lose control. I almost did. Ruiz leaned forward, eyes sharp but kind. Almost, but you didn't, that's what matters. For the first time since the landing, Emily felt the faint flicker of something lighter than fear. Maybe not pride, but relief. Still, the nightmares came. Nights blurred with cold sweat, gasps, whispers of alarms that weren't there. She avoided sleep, fearing the dreams more than the exhaustion. Her mother tried to help, soft words, warm tea, prayers whispered into the dark. But Emily carried the weight in silence. Back home weeks later, the airfield held a celebration. Neighbors cheered, banners waved, her instructor's eyes shone with tears. "You always had the heart of a pilot," he told her, gripping her shoulders. "Now the world knows it too." She smiled, but the sound of clapping rattled in her chest. Every cheer pulled her back to that cabin where applause had been born of desperation, not celebration. She wanted to run. She wanted to hide. But she stood there because she knew the people around her needed to see her stand. The small runway stretched behind her like a scar. She stared at it, remembering the Cessna lessons that once felt so freeing. She wondered if she would ever feel that freedom again. Days turned into weeks. Headlines shifted, the world moved on, but Emily's world had changed permanently. At school, whispers followed her. Teachers looked at her with awe, classmates with curiosity. Some called her brave, others didn't know what to say at all. She walked through hallways like a shadow wearing the skin of a miracle. One afternoon, sitting alone in her room, she pulled out her flight logbook. Her fingers traced the ink of her early entries, takeoff practice, crosswind landings, touch-and-go drills. Pages filled with excitement, the handwriting of a girl chasing a dream. She paused at the last entry, written just before the trip to Madrid. It felt like a lifetime ago. Her pen hovered, but she couldn't write. How could she record what had happened? How could she fit 220 lives, the weight of the impossible, onto a single line in a logbook? She closed it gently, pressing it to her chest. That night her mother sat beside her. "Emily, do you ever regret standing up? That moment when they asked for someone with flight experience, do you wish you had stayed seated?" Emily stared at her hands. "Every part of me was screaming not to stand, but if I hadn't, no one else would have." She looked up, eyes burning. "So no, I don't regret it. I don't know if I'll ever stop feeling scared." Sarah kissed her forehead. "That's what makes you stronger than you realize. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's walking through it." Emily didn't reply, but her mother's words planted somewhere deep. Weeks later, she returned to the airfield for the first time. The Cessna sat waiting, familiar and small. Her instructor asked if she wanted to fly. She hesitated, breath catching, eyes filling. Her body trembled as she stepped toward it. Inside, the yoke felt light compared to the Airbus monster she had wrestled, but her hands still shook. She stared out at the runway, her heart thundering. Then she heard it, faint and steady in her mind. "A calm pilot is a safe pilot." James's voice, her mantra. She exhaled, gripping the yoke. She didn't take off that day. She didn't need to. Just sitting there breathing was enough. Because healing, she realized, wasn't a single moment of triumph. It was slow, painful, step by step, like learning to fly all over again. And maybe, someday, she would take off again. Not because the world needed her to, but because she wanted to. For now, it was enough to know she could. What does normal mean after the world has called you a miracle? Emily Carter walked through her school's hallway with her backpack slung over her shoulder, the same way she had 100 times before. But now, every step felt different. Eyes followed her, whispers trailed behind her. Some kids smiled, some stared, some avoided her entirely, unsure what to say to a girl who had landed a jetliner. Her teachers tried to treat her like nothing had changed, but their glances lingered too long. Their words softened too much. One called her remarkable during attendance, then flushed red with embarrassment. Emily wished they wouldn't. She wished she could vanish into the crowd the way she used to. At lunch, a group of classmates approached, their voices a mix of awe and nerves. "So did it feel like in the movies?" one boy asked. Another chimed in, "Weren't you scared? I would have just passed out." A girl leaned closer. "Are you gonna be like a famous pilot now?" Emily forced a smile, but inside her chest twisted. She gave simple answers. Yes, it was terrifying. No, it didn't feel like the movies. She wasn't a hero, just someone who did what she had to. The conversation fizzled, awkward silences hanging between their questions. That night she lay awake again. The ceiling of her room felt like an endless sky she couldn't land from. She pressed her palms against her eyes until colors danced in the dark. Fear clung to her like smoke, impossible to wash away. Her mother noticed. One morning, Sarah paused at the doorway, watching her daughter sit at the kitchen table, cereal untouched, eyes far away. "Emily," she said softly, "maybe you should talk to someone, a counselor. It's okay to need help." Emily shook her head quickly. "I don't want to. I don't want to talk about it anymore." But the truth was, she thought about it every day. The sound of alarms would echo in her head at random moments, in class, in the shower, while brushing her teeth. She would grip the sink, heart racing, body trembling until the memory faded. Sometimes she imagined the cockpit again, the heavy yoke in her hands. Sometimes she heard James's voice, steady and calm. Sometimes she saw her mother's face, pale with fear, praying silently in row 14. One evening she returned to the airfield. The Cessna sat waiting, familiar and small. Her instructor greeted her warmly, but his eyes searched hers carefully. "You don't have to prove anything," he said gently. Emily nodded, but when she sat in the cockpit, her breath caught. Her hands hovered over the controls, trembling. The runway stretched ahead, but it wasn't the same. It no longer looked like freedom. It looked like responsibility. Heavy, unforgiving responsibility. She sat there for a long time, then climbed out without starting the engine. Her instructor didn't push. He only said, "You'll know when you're ready." But was readiness something that returned, or something you built piece by piece? In quiet moments, Emily replayed her mother's words. "Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's walking through it." She thought of Captain Ruiz's visit. You didn't freeze. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't broken. Maybe she was just healing. But healing was complicated. One Saturday, her town invited her to speak at a community event. She stood on stage in front of hundreds of faces, neighbors, teachers, families she'd known her whole life. Applause filled the room before she said a word. Her throat tightened. She gripped the edges of the podium. When she finally spoke, her voice shook. "People keep calling me brave, but I wasn't brave. I was scared every single second. I thought I was going to fail. I thought," she swallowed hard, eyes stinging. "But fear doesn't mean you stop. Fear means you care. And caring is what kept me going." The room was silent. Then someone began to clap. The applause swelled, but this time it felt different. It didn't feel like pressure. It felt like understanding. Afterward, a little girl approached her, clutching her father's hand. "I want to be a pilot like you," she said shyly. Emily knelt, meeting her eyes. "Then promise me something," she whispered. "Promise me you'll never give up, even when you're scared." The girl nodded, her smile bright. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt something shift inside, something lighter than fear. Still, nights were hardest. Some dreams replayed the landing in vivid detail, the ground rushing closer, the alarms screaming. Others twisted it, showing the plane crashing, her mother's scream echoing forever. She woke with her heart pounding, sheets damp with sweat. She told no one. She simply endured. But endurance was not the same as peace. One evening, sitting on the porch with her mother, Emily finally whispered, "I don't feel like the girl I was before. I don't think I ever will." Sarah wrapped an arm around her. "You're right, you won't, but that's not a loss, Emily, that's growth. What you went through, it changed you. And maybe that's okay. Maybe it's what will make you stronger." Emily leaned against her mother's shoulder, silent. The night sky stretched above them, stars scattered like distant beacons. She wondered if she'd ever fly beneath them again, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And maybe, just maybe, she would. Because deep down, even beneath the fear, the love for flying still burned. It had carried her into the cockpit once, and someday, she knew, it would carry her back into the sky. What does it take to step back into the place that broke you? Emily Carter stood at the edge of the small-town runway, wind tugging gently at her hoodie, the familiar scent of fuel and asphalt filling her lungs. The Cessna sat waiting, its white body reflecting the afternoon sun, innocent and small compared to the steel monster she had once tamed. Yet to her, even this looked daunting. Her instructor watched her closely, hands tucked into his jacket. "There's no rush," he said, his voice quiet. "You get to decide if and when you're ready." Emily nodded, though the storm inside her chest didn't ease. Weeks had passed since the landing. Weeks of interviews, applause, whispers in school hallways. Weeks of calling herself fine when she was. But she was tired of hiding behind fear. Tired of letting the memory of one impossible night decide the rest of her life. She stepped closer to the aircraft. Her palms dampened instantly, her breathing shallow. She touched the cool metal, her fingers tracing the paint as if searching for courage in its surface. Climbing into the cockpit, the familiar seat pressed against her back, the yoke resting lightly under her hands. It should have felt safe. But the flashbacks surged. The Airbus's heavy controls, the deafening alarms, the screams. Her chest constricted. For a moment she thought she might bolt, run down the tarmac and never return. But then she heard it, James Holloway's voice echoing in her memory. "A calm pilot is a safe pilot." She whispered it aloud, shaky but real. "A calm pilot is a safe pilot." Her instructor leaned through the open door. "Do you want me to come with you?" Emily shook her head slowly. "Not yet, just let me sit here." He nodded, stepping back. She sat for nearly an hour, not moving, not flying, just breathing. Each inhale steadier than the last. Each exhale carrying a little of the fear away. That night at home, she admitted to her mother, "I thought I'd run, but I didn't, I stayed." Sarah kissed her forehead. "That's the first flight back, Emily, even if your wheels never left the ground." The days rolled forward. Emily returned again and again. At first she only sat. Then she started the engine, listening to the gentle hum, her chest trembling but steady. Then she taxied down the runway, wheels rattling, heart racing. Every step was a battle, but every battle ended with her still standing. One crisp morning, the sky clear and blue, she knew. She climbed in, buckled the belt, gripped the yoke. Her instructor watched from the ground, radio in hand. She whispered her mantra once more, then pushed the throttle forward. The Cessna rolled, accelerating, the runway blurring beneath her. Fear clawed inside her chest, but she didn't let it win. The nose lifted. Wheels left Earth. The ground fell away. And suddenly she was flying. The air pressed around her, the horizon spread wide. Her fear didn't vanish, but it softened beneath the wind's embrace. For the first time since that night, she wasn't carrying hundreds of lives. She wasn't drowning in alarms. She was simply a girl in the sky again, the way she had once dreamed. Her radio crackled. "How does it feel up there?" her instructor asked. Her throat tightened, a smile small but true tugged at her lips. "Like I remembered," she answered, "like home." The flight was short, a simple loop over the fields. She landed shakily, her hands trembling, her knees weak, but she had done it. On the ground, her instructor hugged her tightly, pride shining in his eyes. "See, you never lost it. It was just waiting for you." Emily's mother stood at the edge of the runway, tears streaming as she watched her daughter climb out of the cockpit. "You're braver than you know," she whispered when Emily reached her. But Emily shook her head. Not brave, just not giving up. Word spread quickly through her small town. People whispered that she had flown again, that she hadn't let fear win. But Emily didn't want the attention this time. She wanted only the quiet knowledge that she had faced what haunted her. Still, the nightmares lingered. She accepted they might always. But now, when she woke gasping, she whispered her mantra, reminded herself she had taken off again, landed again. Fear might visit, but it no longer owned her. Months later, an invitation arrived. A ceremony in London honoring her with an award for extraordinary courage. She didn't want to go at first. She didn't want more cameras, more words she didn't believe. But her mother insisted gently. This isn't about fame, Emily. It's about acknowledging what you gave to others. Sometimes letting people thank you is part of healing too. And so she went. The hall was grand, filled with pilots in uniform, officials, families. Applause thundered when her name was called. She walked to the stage, heart pounding, palms clammy, but her steps steady. The presenter handed her the award. "Emily Carter," he said, "you showed the world what resilience looks like. You reminded us that courage is not age nor experience but heart." The audience rose to their feet, clapping, cheering. Emily's throat tightened. She stepped to the microphone, her hands shaking, but she spoke anyway. "I'm still scared," she admitted softly. The hall hushed instantly. "I don't feel like a hero. I had nightmares for months. I almost gave up flying forever. But what I learned is this: being scared doesn't mean you can't do something. It just means you care enough to be afraid. And if you care, you don't stop. You keep going." A pause, silence so deep it echoed. Then applause roared again, but this time Emily didn't flinch. She let it wash over her, not as pressure but as release. That night, as she left the ceremony, she looked up at the sky, dark, endless, scattered with stars. For the first time, she didn't see fear in it. She saw possibility. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "Someday I'll fly higher." And in her heart, she knew she would. What happens after survival? After the cameras fade, after the applause dies, after the story becomes a headline in someone else's memory? For Emily Carter, survival wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something quieter, harder, and far more complicated. Months had passed since the night she brought 220 souls safely back to Earth. The world had called her a miracle, a hero, an inspiration. But Emily knew the truth. The miracle was not that she landed the plane. The miracle was that she had the strength to face herself afterward. Her nightmares had softened but not disappeared. Some nights she still woke with the echo of alarms in her ears, her chest heaving, her hands trembling as though the yoke were still in them. But she no longer feared the fear. She accepted it. It was proof she had cared, proof she had carried lives that were not her own. She returned often to the airfield, to the Cessna waiting faithfully. Some flights were smooth, others shaky. Sometimes she sat in the cockpit and cried before she ever started the engine. But she kept coming back, step by step, flight by flight. Her instructor once asked, "Why keep pushing yourself, Emily? You've already proven more than anyone could ask." She looked at the horizon, eyes steady. "Because flying isn't just about proving, it's about living. And I don't want fear to decide how I live." At school, whispers eventually faded. Friends stopped asking questions. Teachers treated her almost normally again. Almost. She was still the girl who had landed a plane, but she was also Emily again. The girl who liked music, who doodled in notebooks, who sometimes laughed so hard she cried. Slowly, life began to stitch itself back together. But pieces of her would never be the same. One afternoon, while sitting on the porch, her mother asked, "Do you ever wish it had been someone else? Someone older, more experienced?" Emily thought about it long and hard. "Sometimes, but if it had, I wouldn't know who I am now. I don't think I'd trade that, even if it hurt." Sarah nodded, tears glistening. "You grew up on that plane, faster than I ever wanted you to." Emily squeezed her mother's hand. "Maybe, but I'm still me, just more me than before." Her story spread farther than she realized. Letters continued to arrive, some from pilots, some from passengers who had been on Flight 327. One man wrote, "I was ready to die that night. Then I heard your voice through the cockpit door. You didn't just save us, you gave me hope again." Emily held that letter for a long time, tears dripping onto the paper. She had never thought of herself as hope, but maybe that was what she had become, even if she never asked to be. Months later, she was invited to speak at an aviation school. She stood before rows of young cadets, some not much older than she was. She looked at their eager faces, their shining eyes, and she said, "Flying isn't about power. It isn't about skill. It's about responsibility, about caring for the lives you carry. And sometimes it means carrying fear with you too. Don't be ashamed of that. Let it guide you." Her words lingered in the quiet hall long after she stepped away. Years passed. Emily continued flying, continued learning. The trauma never vanished entirely. It lived as a scar inside her, a reminder. But scars didn't mean weakness. They meant survival. They meant memory. And she carried hers with dignity. One evening, standing alone on the runway as the sun set in golden fire, she thought back to that night over the Atlantic, to the moment she pressed the transmit button and spoke into the void. "This is passenger Emily Carter. I'm 16. Both pilots are unconscious." She remembered the weight of silence that followed, the impossible truth of what she had stepped into. And she smiled faintly, because she realized something she hadn't before. The night had not only been about saving 220 lives, it had been about discovering her own strength. Not the loud kind, not the kind that shouts or demands recognition, but the quiet kind, the strength that shakes, that doubts, that cries, and still does what must be done. Her mother joined her on the runway, linking her arm with Emily's. They stood together, watching the last light fade. "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened?" Sarah asked softly. Emily exhaled, eyes fixed on the horizon. "No, because it taught me something I'll never forget." "What's that?" "That sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It doesn't ask for applause, it simply acts." The wind shifted, cool against her face. The runway stretched forward, endless, waiting. Somewhere far above, a plane roared through the fatting sky, carrying lives in its belly, trusting unseen hands to guide it home. Emily tilted her head back, watching it disappear into the clouds. And she whispered, "Fly safe."